So we've learned that there's a strong connection between giving your team space to be able to get good at what they do and team engagement. We also understand it's important that teams are getting work out the door. Often, as developers, we find ourselves wanting to get the best code or the best system and make sure that we've stomped out all technical debt. But there's always a balance to be struck between writing great code and delivering value. So, in this episode of Questions to Ask in a Retrospective, we're going to explore three different questions that will allow us to dig into those two things. Are we giving our team space to get good at what they do? And are we making sure that we're getting value out the door? We're not trying to create the Sistine Chapel, but we're trying to deliver value quick so that we can learn, pivot, and get better in the next sprint. So, welcome back to our series on Questions to Ask in a Retrospective. So we're going to explore some things that might seem a little bit counterintuitive today. Sure, we want to make sure our teams are constantly getting good, and when they get good, we want to see them fall into a pattern of being able to deliver work in a fast manner, make sure that they're solving things, and things should become a little bit easier. But there's always a balance. If things become easy, then we're not necessarily stretching ourselves. So teams that are frustrated, teams that are finding the hard thing to do, are going to be pushing themselves to get better. We know from lots of experience and lots of coaching of different teams, and also from Dan Pink's book Drive, that mastery is something that drives team engagement. That people that are thought workers, people that are looking to solve the complex problems, the kinds of problems we solve inside Scrum, are driven and want to be able to get better at what they do. So, giving your team space and an opportunity to become masters at their work is important. So, one way we can see that if our team is on track to do that is ask them, are they frustrated? What was frustrating about the last sprint? And explore that. So, our first question that we're going to look at is what was actually the most frustrating task this sprint? And the idea here is that if we're constantly told, well, no, nothing was really frustrating, then we want to stretch and say, hey, okay, cool. Is there something more we can do that might be a little more difficult? Do we have an opportunity to get in there and try something more difficult? Because when you put yourself at the edge of your ability, that's where you grow. If you constantly look at the thing that you've been doing all that you do all the time and you're just staying there, it becomes easy, it becomes routine, you're not necessarily giving your chance, you're giving yourself a chance to stretch yourself. So asking your team, what was frustrating about this last sprint? What stretched you? What was the thing that you beat your head against the wall and had a hard time solving? And challenging them to find those things. If they haven't done that in a while, get them to pull something into their sprint, pull a new technique, pull a new approach, deal with a new customer, try to solve a new problem that they haven't solved before that will allow them to learn and stretch. So, what was the most frustrating task this sprint? And similar to that is what skills were you able to stretch during this sprint? So making sure that when you look at the skills of being a good developer, and again, this isn't just something that exists inside code. This is something that exists across whatever kinds of work we might find our team doing. What are they doing to stretch their skills, to be able to put themselves to try in trying to do work that goes beyond what they're used to? So these two questions, what do we find frustrating? Frustrating is going to help bring out opportunities to explore, are you actually getting frustrated with the work? Is there something that you're beating your head against the wall? And if not, explore, are there opportunities that might actually be frustrating that you can learn from? And the next is a little more direct, to the point. What did you stretch yourself during this sprint? So we want to make sure that as we're working with our teams, that we're constantly pulling them into the next step, asking them to get better at what they do, and giving them opportunities and space to do that. So, Scrum Masters, when you see your team fall into a routine, when you see them do and solve the same kinds of problems time in and time out, while there's a lot of benefit to be had there, it's only going to get you so far. So, teams that are high performing, that are constantly stretching themselves, that are at the edge of their game, that are able to solve more kinds of problems, that have more tools in the tool belt, are going to be better, and there's value in that. So, make sure that over time your team is taking opportunities to really do things that they're not used to, things that are frustrating, things that are going to stretch them. Part of the concept behind being T-shaped. So if you're doing the same thing over and over, are there other skills inside the team that are part of that delivery and building product that they can try that maybe they haven't worked in before? That can be very frustrating when you first start doing it, but over time, as you get good at that, you'll deepen yourself. And inside Scrum, when we teach Scrum, the Scrum Master training, we want to talk about creating T-shaped teams. The idea that they're deep in certain areas, but you can constantly build that depth. And that's one of the goals that we want to get out of these first two questions. We're going to focus now not on our teams getting good, but we're going to look on something that could actually be potentially a little bit of a downside to getting really, really good people on your team. And it's that when we become a really, really good developer, and this focus is actually going to be on software developers for just a little bit, although it can apply across different skills and different kinds of teams. One of the things that we see a lot, and I've been there, I was a developer from way back, is that we get proud at what we do. We create our code babies, they're the best, they're beautiful. We want to spend a lot of time making them as good as we possibly can. And sometimes what we will run into or run the risk of is that balance between trying to create the best possible code and delivering value. There's always balance. We want to make sure that we're getting good work out the door. And so while there's this focus to high quality agile engineering that's going to come over time as we stretch ourselves, there's also an important understanding that we need to have maybe some technical debt in our system because we're delivering value. So a question that you can ask as a Scrum Master to see where you are is ask your developers what code that you develop during the sprint that you would like to write differently. This is an opportunity for a developer to look back on what they did and find things that they know they can get better. And there's a few possible things that could come to that. One is they really wouldn't want to write anything differently. They're proud of it. They felt that it solved the value. And if they're delivering value on time, that's where we want to get to. But other times they look back and they realize that, sometimes we had to take some shortcuts. And while we want to be careful, just like with any debt that we take on in our personal life, there's always a balance. Debt is helpful. Debt allows us to get things faster that we need. For instance, if I need to buy a car because I need to get to work faster because I live in Alabama, I might take a car loan out. That allows me to get a car that's going to let me get to work faster. But if I take a lot of credit card debt and I spend a lot and that technical debt builds up, it can be hard to grow out of. So there's a balance. So this question is going to help. Are we happy because we wrote good code and we delivered on time? Are we not happy because we actually were trying to write perfect code and we didn't deliver anything? So that's going to be maybe a very upset product owner. Customers aren't getting their problem solved. Anytime that we have inventory on the shelf or code that actually doesn't get deployed at the end of the sprint, we run the risk of getting waste. That's one of the wastes inside lean techniques or lean thinking, lean manufacturing is inventory, which code that doesn't get delivered because we're trying to make it perfect is inventory or waste. Or we really did things that were too fast and we're not taking time to look back and understand what we're doing. But exploring this question and asking not just this question, but why do you feel that way? And encouraging your team to talk about it is going to be something that will help drive that insight on, are we delivering good code? Are we delivering value? And are we doing things as quickly as possible, knowing that inside an iterative process, we can always have the opportunity to go back and make it better later. Just like we're going to pay down our car loan over time, we can pay down our technical debt. So being okay with a little bit of technical debt is important, making sure we're paying it down. And this question is going to allow us to understand and be introspective at the work we're doing and find ways that we could both get better at it and also make sure that we're delivering fast. So there's a balance in both of these. Balance of being frustrated, of stretching ourselves. Balance of delivering great work in a timely manner, but also delivering value. And what we want to strike is balance. Getting really, really comfortable and doing the same thing over and over is not necessarily growing us as a team. Trying to create perfect code or creating a lot of technical debt because we're getting a lot of work out the door, that's not helpful. But as long as we are conscientious of what we're doing and the decisions we're making, we'll be able to drive great teams that are high performing and able to get really, really good at what they do. And these work together and feed off each other because they're going to build teams that devote time to being and good at what they do, or that mastery, which is going to help us build engagement. Engagement helps us build speed and velocity. So, Scrum Masters, make sure you're challenging your teams in these areas. So, these are three questions that you could ask at your next retrospective to help understand where your balance is in delivering code and getting good at what you do. So that concludes this episode of Questions Asked in a Retrospective. I hope you're finding these helpful and insightful. And if you are, there's three things we would like you to do. One, make sure you go ahead and click the like button down there. Make sure you share this with your friends, others that might find it valuable, and subscribe. This is just the start of the content that we're trying to provide as a guide. We're going to go a lot deeper and a lot further, and we want to bring you along with this journey. So comment, tell us what directions, what questions do you have, and how could we help you get really, really good at doing Scrum? Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you next time.